Hey, Bill.
Hey Chris, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. Always good hearing from you, hearing your insight. I'm curious. Did you play any Puck Doku today?
I didn't get to it today. There
Hmm.
was a couple of deadlines I was working around. I actually, uh, I had, I slept a little later this morning and had to play catch up. So then I missed today for Puckdoku and Immaculate Grid. So
How have you been doing with it? Good.
yeah, the some days can be tough.
Yeah,
You know, but whenever I can find whenever I can think of like flyers that play for multiple teams, even the flyers aren't one of the teams, one of the categories for that day.
hmm,
I can usually find some guys that will get good rarity scores.
yeah.
And when you have guys that you have newer teams, that's when it gets that's where I find it a little
That's
bit
hard.
harder because you have a
Yeah,
smaller pool of players.
right. And like, there was one a couple weeks ago that had Seattle, and I was like, oh God, I
Yeah,
can't even
yeah,
remember. But yeah, no, I mean, it's been fun. There's been a couple of them that I've gotten kind of the same thing. Like if I know a flyer that's played here and there. But yeah, it's funny. I did it with Mike 2 weeks ago, and he
yeah.
actually did really good at it. Some of the other ones that I took me like an hour to find certain, because what I tried to do was, you probably saw it, but I was trying to get guys that he played with as
Right,
teammates on that team, and
right.
it was hard. But it's a fun game, especially when it's put up that early. It's kind of a brain teaser. But anyway, let's kind of get into the hockey talk. So there's still one more contract they have left.
Yeah.
Morgan Frost. I figured you knew I was going to ask you about this. He's still an RFA. Is there any, maybe concern or anything like that Frost isn't going to, be signed by the time Cam starts? Or are you thinking that he's just going to he'll be
I
at
know.
camp?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of concern about it. Now that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if we go into Labor Day and it's not done yet.
Hmm.
Um, wouldn't be surprised if the calendar flips to the first week in September, and that might be when right after Labor Day, where maybe that's when they feel the sense of urgency. Um, it's not uncommon where and you have to look at it this way. Morgan's 2022-23 season was almost two seasons in one.
Yeah.
You know, there was the final 55 games where he led the team in scoring.
Hmm.
And then you have the first 27 games where
He's compared to a toilet seat.
where he was at the fourth line for a while, where he was in
Yeah.
towards his doghouse, where he got scratched for a game, all the things that led up to that. And so, do you pay him based upon the final 55 games?
Hmm.
You can't pay him only based on the first 27,
Right.
but where's the middle ground, and how much of it is Morgan betting on himself,
Right.
and how much of it is the Flyers showing faith that he'll take that next step.
Right.
Um, I would not be surprised at all if they end up with a 1-year deal
I was
at a
thinking the same thing.
compromised number.
Hmm.
But the only thing with that is then you're looking at an arbitration case potentially next off season.
Right.
Once arbitration gets involved, and hopefully has a good year for himself and for the team,
Yeah.
then it becomes a harder thing to negotiate when he's 2 years away from being unrestricted. But I think that's kind of the way it's going. I think unless there's some kind of breakthrough, I don't see them going 3 years, because 3 years takes them right to UFA status.
Right.
But I could see 2 years, or they could find a number that works for both of them, and then they have 1 year before to figure it out before he's potentially unrestricted. But I think the most likely scenario right now seems to be some kind of 1-year compromise and then revisit it next off season.
Yeah. I was curious if any part of this, and I'm curious kind of what you think too. Like, does any part of you maybe look at this as Morgan maybe looking at like an Alex Newhook type deal, like 4 years at 2.9, where it's like, Newhook, who he put up 30 points, Frost put up, I think, 46. So, 16 more. Obviously there'd be more in that range, but I think it's a good point that you mentioned too. Like, there's, and basically it was 2 different seasons. It's a good point. Because you really turned on at the end of the year. And I think a lot of people, I think some people saw that, some people maybe didn't, or maybe just didn't want to believe it. I don't know. But I think it's interesting. I'm just curious, like, does any part of you think that this could be, maybe it ends up being like a longer term deal, or are you just more set on 1 year?
I'm not sure that I'm not sure that they think are convinced enough that Morgan fully turned the corner.
Okay.
I might disagree with that.
I personally do, if that's the case.
But
yeah.
I think that may be the thought process here.
Mm-hmm.
And for Frost, it's bet on yourself and maybe you cash in more in a year.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things with Frost too, besides leading the team in scoring over the final 55 games, tell you the guy put about actually a lot of even strength points. He led the team in even strength scoring as well as assists, and he didn't get much help from power play points. Now the Flyers power play collectively was bad.
Yeah,
but
I think the power play is. I mean, we could probably do a whole show on the power play alone.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
There's that
for sure. So I think that I think part of getting him to the next stage of his NHL development, it's going to incorporate more power play time. Not that he didn't get power play time, he did, but if you look at where he was relative to the group of forwards as a whole, I think it was fifth or sixth among forwards with power play ice time over the course of the season that it had, which equates to a second power play unit usage. And but I think that if you really break it down, I think towards the latter part of the season, from March onward, I thought that in terms of entries into the offensive zone, he actually cleaned a lot of that stuff
up. I thought he got better at that too. Yeah.
Now there's still room for more consistency and whatever. It was a problem. I thought even Morgan's season really turned around in early, really end of November, but really early December. That 55 game sample goes back to December 9th to the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I think hitting that next level will entail more power play production.
Yeah.
But I don't know where the Flyers, the team, are going to be still on the power play. That when I look at their roster here, it's a bigger picture question. I kind of like the group of forwards. Maybe it's
do too.
Maybe it's not an elite group of forwards, but it's a pretty deep one.
Yeah.
And I think they get scoring from different sources and different nights. Hopefully Couturier is healthy. Hopefully Atkinson is healthy. That would help quite a bit.
Yeah.
I have my share of concerns still with the blue line and keeping the puck out of the net.
Yeah.
but as far as the forward group goes, it's not a bad group, and it's a group that's going to continue to improve in years to come as Gauthier becomes NHL ready, Michkov eventually. I think the Flyers are in pretty good shape with that. But on the flip side, when you're always playing from, or too often playing from behind, and they need to also improve puck movement. They need to get out of their zone a little bit more easily, because a lot of times all you can do in that case is just hang in, hopefully get a line change out there, and get your next group out. That really reduces scoring opportunities. So I don't know where they're going to be in those regards. I'm hopeful a guy like York can take the next step. I'm hopeful that maybe Emil Andre can make an impact this season. It's going to the defenseman's ability to get the puck up to the forward is going to have an effect on all the forward scoring and on team scoring.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these guys are trying to take that next step, or still unknown quantities. So those are the things that concern me heading into camp, much more than whether Frost will agree to a deal by the start of camp, which I think will happen.
Right. No, for sure. And that's the thing. I'm not necessarily concerned either. I think just I think the biggest thing with the defense for me is that, and I talked about this with Mike. We actually did a whole part of our segment last week was talking about the D, and it was just more of, they don't have anyone that can log minutes like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, you get rid of a Provorov, right? I mean, you have no one's going to come in and going to be able to take those minutes away. That's a lot of minutes that that you're throwing onto somebody else, like a guy like Sanheim or a guy like Cam York or even Ristolainen for that matter. Now, is there part of me that thinks that a guy like Stahl's probably going to play too high in the lineup? Yeah, I think so. it just worries me. And again, I agree with the forwards. I mean, I think if healthy, if you have Couturier, you have Atkinson, you got to hope that Farabee's better. If that's the case, I think they probably will score more. I don't know by how much, right? Because again, special teams, you mentioned that a little bit, but defensively, they've definitely gotten worse. And the other part of it is who's your starting goaltender on October 12th?
Right.
Because right now you have no idea.
Well, I mean, as of now, it's Carter Hart.
Right.
As long as that status quo holds, then it is Carter Hart, and the question is who's the second goalie,
right?
And that's really an open question mark right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's the nature of the position is obviously there's always a lot of pressure on the goalie,
right?
But when a team D is strong enough on one side or weak enough on the other side, the goaltending is going to go with it. You give up several backdoor goals that you can't blame on the goalie. Now it's in the back of the goalie's head. I got to watch out for the backdoor kind of play because that side isn't guarded. So you're starting to cheat off the post. All of a sudden you let in a short side goal, and you well, that's awful. That's on the goalie, and it is. But you can't separate the whole thing of it. So much of it is how the team is playing,
right?
What the goalie's confidence level is. It's so hard to separate goaltending from team play.
Right.
Even though it's a solitary position, it's also very much dependent on how the team as a whole plays.
Right.
And again, if the team as a whole is strong enough or weak enough, it'll either pick up or drag down.
Exactly. And that's why you've seen Hart's numbers for a goaltender that, I know a lot of people only really look at numbers for goalies. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know the last time I've looked at Hart's numbers because there's really no point. I mean, you've seen it. I've seen it, how bad they've been in front of the goalies in these past couple of years. Sometimes it's gotten better. I think last year they were, better as a team for the most part, but there were still, glaring issues. But like defensively, it gets rough, and and I agree. I think for the most part, it's it's hard to say, oh, he should have had that or this and that when there's 3 failed clears at the blue line, that type of stuff. So it's kind of hard to say, and sometimes it's you got to pick and choose really. Who you want to blame because there's so many issues at times too. And part of the goalie thing is obviously Fedotov now. I don't know how much you can talk about it, but is there anything, that maybe just any quick thoughts you have on the Fedotov situation and kind of what's been happening these past couple of days?
Well, obviously it's a positive that the Flyers got a favorable ruling here.
Yeah.
And I can only speak for myself. The organization has not issued a statement on it yet. I think they're waiting to see where the next steps go. Pretty sure that's where things are right now. It sounds like Red Army Siska is planning to appeal to the now. It'll be appeal within the IIHF. They're appealing a IIHF decision to the IIHF disciplinary board. I'd be shocked if they win that. Yeah. I think they're only hoping for a reduction of of some of the sanctions against them. And again, I can only speak for myself here. In my own view here, I don't think they deserve to have the sanctions reduced. There's not a transfer agreement or a memorandum of understanding between the NHL and the KHL. On the flip side, even when the NHL canceled it, the two sides were honoring the spirit of it, and they really were just keeping that status quo. Told contracts are nothing new in the NHL, and this wasn't a case of Fedotov skipping out on the contract, deciding I don't want to come. He had no choice in the matter.
Yeah,
he couldn't honor the contract.
Yeah,
and I probably won't say more than that in those regards.
Right.
But I think that the fact that they knew he had a contract, he couldn't fulfill it, that there's a precedent with total contracts, and yet they enticed him by whatever means they enticed him by to re-sign a new deal. I never thought that once it got out of the KHL's hands and went to the International Hockey Federation that they were going to win. And the decision, frankly, didn't surprise me.
Right.
But now what are the next steps? And if Ivan were to stay in Russia, follow that, well, okay. In terms of playing in the KHL, he's suspended for 4 months, September until January 1st.
They're basically kind of treating him like he's an RFA that hasn't signed, really.
Yeah.
Because he can't play until January 1st, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah, he can't play over there. He can't play in Russia. I thought it was odd that they didn't nullify the deal because the team is banned from international transfers until August 10th, I believe, 2024. And an NHL to KHL transfer is an international transfer.
Right.
So it wouldn't make sense for that to be allowed. I think the fact that he's banned from any league play prevents an end around from Cescalona because, what would stop them from lending him out to a VHL team in the minor league or a weak sister KHL team until the suspension is up, then he rejoins the team on January 1st. So, this way, if he's banned from any play in Russia until the suspension is up, then that takes that option away from them. But for any player, and you have to feel for him to miss a season and a half. That's hard. It's hard,
especially a goalie too. Yeah,
to miss that and then jump right back in.
Yeah.
But at this point, in terms of NHL eligibility, which this doesn't affect NHL eligibility, he could play right away in the NHL. But he's unrestricted after next season, so it wouldn't make the slightest bit of sense to send him to the Phantoms just to turn him loose as an unrestricted free agent after all the trouble you go to.
Right.
It certainly doesn't make sense to loan him back to a KHL team just to turn him loose at the end of the season after you've been through the process here of trying to have your contractual rights upheld. That if you were going to loan him, it probably would have already been done. I would think. Again, this is just my read on it, and it's nothing nothing official. But that's just trying to follow a line of logic on here. So I think it's very much up in the air. I would caution people, though, be very careful about what you read and what you believe on the situation. Wait until there's some kind of official word on it. It's can only go by what the player himself has said, and what the player himself said. The only thing he said on it is, "I just want to play hockey again."
Yeah.
And whatever the decision is, I'll abide by it.
Right.
He hasn't ever contradicted that. It's kind of, he wants to play. Playing over here he could play over here right away. He wouldn't have to wait another half of a season. Right. But how it's going to all play out is anybody's guess. And the other part of it too is I know people worry about Michkov.
I was going to ask you about that. I don't think there's anything. Yeah,
and honestly, I don't think there's.
It's two different teams.
Two different teams, two different rival teams at that.
Yeah.
And you're talking about a player signed for 3 more years over there.
One is 18, the other one's 26.
And yeah. So.
And I feel like they have to know that Michkov's going to come over here, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's. I mean, I know it's years ago, but they probably felt, I wonder if Capitals fans, when they got Ovechkin, thought the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, if there's anything that's similar to that, I don't know, because I was only 1 year old, but still. But anyway, speaking of Michkov, played at center in the preseason. I know you've been kind of keeping up on him and following that. What have you kind of seen from him from center? It doesn't really shock me, to be honest, him going to center. And I was talking about this with a friend of mine, and he's like, I don't know. He's like, I didn't really understand it. And I was like, he has the skill. Yeah. The Flyers, they've done that for years. I mean, guys like Lawton, guys like Michael Raffle is probably one of the better examples of it. Guys that could come over here that were natural wingers turned into centers. Essentially, the only thing, Giroux, yeah. Guys that you could just make into centers off of faceoffs. But just kind of going off that with Michkov, like, what have you liked? What are some things maybe you don't like? And just kind of as a whole, what have you seen from him at center in the preseason?
He has not looked at all out of place, and even off the puck. Mm-hmm. He's a very smart hockey player. He goes to the right spots.
Yeah.
I think he has a good work ethic. I've seen him, commendable competitiveness level and effort from him in the preseason games. Is he immune from mistakes? No. Right. But he's still only 18 years old, and he has all the tools actually to be a pretty complete player.
Yeah.
And one thing that moving to center has done is it's opened up his playmaking a little bit. Now, you want the goal scoring, and I think he'll score goals too, and probably score more on the wing, maybe a few more assists playing in the middle. But points are points. If you're right. setting somebody else up and they're scoring, or you're scoring it, it's still a goal on the board for your side.
Exactly. If the puck's going in, it doesn't matter.
No, for sure. Yeah. And he can create.
Right.
Playing in the middle opens up a lot of opportunities for creativity for him. Now, I don't have a lot of negatives. The only thing I'll say is that
that's good to know.
I've noticed that he's great on his edges. He's very hard to take off the puck when he's moving laterally. Mm-hmm. He's worked on the walls. He's forechecked well. This is my first real time just watching him shift after shift.
Yeah,
I think his speed is okay. I don't think he has blinding breakaway kind of speed.
Mm-hmm.
You'd like to see him be Pavel Bure out there.
It's not the end of the world. That first step. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the end of the world if he's not, because he's such a smart player.
Right.
And again, he is so good moving laterally. If you're playing center, you're not going to cheat out of the defensive zone. So he's not going to cherry pick out of the red line.
Right.
So he'd be a little later leaving the defensive zone. So breakaway 2-on-1 kind of things. I don't know if he's going to get a ton of them, but I think when you weigh it in the mix there, as long as he keeps developing in the middle the way it looks like he's very capable of developing, it adds versatility and it adds another option.
Right.
And B, truthfully, if you weigh the value to a team of a center versus a winger, center usually comes out ahead. Centers are typically more valuable
all the time, yeah.
than wingers. So, and that way if he plays center, then maybe Gauthier can stay on a wing. It just opens up a whole lot of possibilities. The more versatility you have, the more options you have, the better. I don't see any downside to it.
Right, and that's how I feel too. I mean, where he is now, I mean, I think part of it is like a lot of the videos and the clips and the highlights that you see on YouTube and stuff, because that's all I really have to watch them. And for some people, and like when I look at it, and I'm like, a lot of it's from when he's 15, 16, 17. I mean, now he's 18 years old. It's like, how much of that could have changed? And also at the same time, like as he gets older, does he get better along the wall? Like you were saying, the forecheck, right? Physicality, right? If he puts, more weight on, all that stuff, I think can help as well. And I think it's better too, because I feel like, he can play both sides of the power play, both flanks. You could have him on the right side as the left shot, or you can have him on the open one-timer spot too. So that's part of it. And same thing with Gauthier. I think it's a good thing you mentioned Gauthier. And again, this is the last one I do have for you, Bill. Does any part of you kind of think that since they've drafted Michkov, that maybe some fans or different people or just anything like that, they've kind of forgotten like how good guys like Gauthier can be and other prospects and stuff like that? Like, it's not just Michkov, you know what I mean? And that's not me saying that Michkov is bad or we shouldn't be excited, because that's, farthest from the truth. And I'm, hell of a lot of excited for Michkov, because one of the best players that we've, ever picked in the draft. But, I think there's a little bit of a mix there where it's like, he can't be where some people are kind of just like, throwing everything down on everyone else. More specifically, I guess guys like Gauthier, because we have Michkov.
Yeah, and I think that the organization and the players themselves will only benefit from it.
Yeah.
And even if, I think if Michkov is on a wing, some people put out, oh, well, Gauthier in the middle and Michkov and Forster are the wings. I don't love that combination.
Me neither.
Because someone has to be the distributor.
Exactly.
And, at that point, almost by default, Michkov becomes your distributor. I want to see him score too. I want to see a balance. I want to see where he's a threat either to score or to set up a play.
Right.
But if they're on two different lines, or if Michkov is in the middle and Gauthier is on a wing, then I think it can work. And Gauthier to me is always going to be a shoot first player, and that can work in the middle. It's not
right.
not that there aren't guys who have been shoot first centers who've had successful careers. That certainly isn't the case. It's just just when you're building a line combination, you just have to account for what complements him the best.
Right.
I
think part of it too, and so I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think part of it too is Forster's probably going to be in the league at least maybe 2 or 3 years by the time we even maybe see Michkov.
Right.
That's part of it too. It's like you could be putting a veteran guy. But go on, continue.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you have your current group.
Right.
You have the Tippett's, Farabee, Frost. Hopefully those guys continue their development.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you have a pretty darn talented and deep core forwards.
Yeah.
I think that I think you have to go work with the group you have. I don't think you pine for somebody else's group. You look at how you make the group you have work the best way they can. And I think it's a group that potentially could go 3 lines deep in terms of scoring it with a fourth line that's a viable fourth line.
Right.
A guy like Denwye, for example. Mm-hmm. I think he's an NHL player.
Yeah.
So, as you're developing guys, all of a sudden you have a pretty good group. I think if you build the blue line up a little bit, and that not just at the current NHL level, but just in terms of the prospect pool.
I agree. I think they need to add more there too.
And that can sometimes be easier said than done. I mean, if you look at the group of defensemen the Flyers had just a few years ago, where they expended a lot of first round picks on defensemen. 2013, 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
Their first round picks were defensemen. Cam York was their first pick in 2019. So that you can't build everything at once, and sometimes you need guys who are drafted a little bit later to click for you too.
Right.
Like Ghost did to an extent. That guy was a 3rd round pick, and he was contributing. But I think just in terms of looking at the upside of the defensive prospect pool, I think that's the next step here. Now, if you go, if you go another year out, and let's just say you're positioned to draft, Yzerman, for example, you have to draft him. You take the best player.
Right.
But if you're drafting a little bit later, there's a lot of good defensemen available. Mm-hmm. And, maybe you can build a little bit off of that. And, I think we're not going to see it this season, what you have, but I'm hopeful that within the next 2 years or so, you've got a good young group, a good group that's in the prime of its career.
Yeah.
And then some other pieces coming on. And also there's trade possibilities too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you trade. It's so much easier in this league to trade from strength, and so much easier to trade some youth where where they haven't really maxed out their contracts yet. That's where you can make hockey trades still in this game.
Yeah.
And the deeper you are, the more ability you have to make trades. So, it's still, they're not there yet. There's steps to take. But I think the early steps have been promising ones.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think everything from this summer, it feels like someone has just taken the 200-pound fridge that was on top of the Flyers and just pushed it over. You know what I mean? Like it feels better to talk about the team again. But Bill, that is the last one I do have for you. There was one in the chat that was from my father that he sent me a text. It was a wrestling one, and I
All
do
right.
need to find it. I think if I can.
All right.
Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. He said, "Ask Bill which faction of the Fabulous Freebirds you like better." I don't know. I don't know what any of this means. This is like a second language, but
Yeah, I think you have to go Hayes, Gordy, and Roberts.
okay.
I like Jimmy Garvin as kind of the fourth Freebird, but I think you got to go with the classic lineup. And I was a big Terry Gordy guy.
Okay. Have you secured your ticket for WrestleMania yet?
No, and being in Philly, and my son enjoying wrestling, I probably need to do that. I'd like to do that. I'm not really following WWE or AEW of late. But maybe as it gets a little closer, I can start watching and get up on it again a little bit.
There you go. All right. Well, we'll see. Hopefully, I'll see you there. I was supposed to go with my dad, and he ended up getting tickets with his buddies, and then I didn't get a ticket, so I guess I'm not going. But anyway,
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. Always good hearing from you. And we'll see what happens soon.
Right.
All right. See you, Bill. Bye.